Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on NTV Weekend Edition. It is the 11th day of the month of April 2021 and we have all the stories making headlines across the country and beyond. But here are some of our top stories tonight. Tonight, and I will hold on. Another 18 people succumbed to COVID-19 as the daily positivity rate remains obstinately above 10%. And in tonight's special report, the visible scars and the invisible wounds of human-wildlife conflict. Tonight, Bridget Sangana paints a picture of the wildlife strife playing out in the Mara. Plus,
we have decided to do it out here just to ensure that we are compliant with all the protocols issued by the Ministry of Health.
The judiciary in uncharted territory as the search for a new Chief Justice begins tomorrow. Also tonight, a family's agony as a factory worker is crushed to death at the rye paper mills in Webuye.
This is Weekend Edition with Zainab Ismail.
Indeed, thank you for joining us. I'm not alone on the sign language interpretation this evening. Is Flora Tieno. Well, tonight, we report that another 18 people have succumbed to the COVID-19 to push the country's death toll to 2,348. 2 of the new fatalities occurred within the last 24 hours, 10 within the last month, and 6 were late death reports that occurred on various dates. Now, the daily positivity rate also remains above 10%, where 486 small people tested positive in the last 24 hours from 4,134 samples, pointing to the 11.8% positivity rate. The country's cumulative number of confirmed positive cases has now reached 145,670. Meanwhile, another 490 people have recovered, bringing the total number of recoveries in the country to 99,095. There are currently 1,660 patients admitted to various health facilities throughout the country, with 5,994 patients on home-based isolation and care. 256 patients are currently in the intensive care unit. Meanwhile, the judiciary finds itself in unfamiliar territory as it begins the search for a new Chief Justice this week following the retirement of Justice David Maraga earlier this year. The interviews will have to factor in safety protocols to limit the spread of the coronavirus that has affected most public operations. The JSC is confident that all is in place and that the 3-week process will be without hitches. Here's Layla Mohammed with more.
COVID-19 protocols will be strictly observed as the red carpet has been rolled out at the Supreme Court grounds in Nairobi, the stage for the search for Kenya's next Chief Justice. Over the next 10 days, 10 candidates will try to convince the Judicial Service Commission that they are the best suited for the next president of the Supreme Court and the head of the judiciary.
When we sent out the advert inviting interested candidates to apply, we received 13 applications for position of Chief Justice. Out of these 13, 10 met the minimum statutory and constitutional requirements for the position, so they were all shortlisted, and 3 fell by the wayside.
Following a public participation that was conducted online, the JSC says that the affected candidates will be given an opportunity to respond to those allegations at their formal interviews.
We got complaints, we got compliments, and for the complaints, the candidates were asked to respond. All complaints are taken into account by the Commission. As regards the LSK, it really doesn't matter who has brought the complaint. As long as it is a complaint, the candidate is asked to respond, and the Commission takes into account both the complaint and the response.
The 11-member JSC is expected to sit for the interviews with Professor Olive Mugenda, expected to chair the process.
When the Chief Justice is not there, then he is not there. So last time we had the Vice Chair chairing the interviews, And that is what is going to happen this time.
Within 7 days after the interviews, the JSC will be expected to present their choice to the head of state, who in turn will forward their nominee's name to Parliament for approval. First up to face the vetting panel on Monday will be High Court Judge Chitembwe Said Juma. Justice Chitembwe, who holds a master's degree from University of Nairobi, is a distinguished legal mind but has found himself in the limelight for a number of wrong reasons.
Some people will even tell you law is what courts say is law.
His interview will be followed by that of Law Professor Patricia Mbote on Tuesday.
An evaluation has been taken.
Court of Appeal Judge Martha Koome, who has served in the Appellate Division for 8 years and also served as a High Court judge for 8 years before that, will face the Judicial Service Commission on Wednesday. Employment and Labour Relations Judge David Marete, who worked in the Office of the Attorney General for 17 years, will make his case before the Commission on Thursday.
He was very keen on life.
He will be followed by Senior Counsel Philip Morgor, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, on Friday to wrap up the first week of interviews. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
It will certainly be a very interesting process as we see who will be the next Chief Justice of the Republic, just less than about 16 months to the next general elections. And meanwhile, as the level of debt climbs relentlessly, some economists and indeed Kenyans are still worried about the cost of carrying that debt amid proposals to raise the debt ceiling. Nambale Member of Parliament Sakwa Bunyase also says this is the right time to debate his bill, the Public Debt Management Authority Bill 2020, that he says will tame the government's huge borrowing appetite. The former principal economist at the World Bank proposes to have the country's borrowing controlled by a semi-autonomous authority, saying it is time the government lived within its means. NTV's Kennedy Muredi has more details.
Parliament has been mulling over plans to expand the public debt ceiling from the current 9 trillion shillings for development spending. This proposal may just find itself on Parliament's to-do list as soon as it resumes, bearing in mind that the public debt is very near to the roof. But also pending in Parliament are proposals on how to tame the government's huge borrowing appetite.
If you use Central Bank data, which I personally do not think it's correct, they are saying that our total debt is 7.3, something about 7.4. Earlier on, we had a debate in which the numbers were about 8.4 trillion.
Economists have warned that the country was borrowing too much money, the public debt was ballooning so fast, and that economic ruin will be inevitable. But while the economy hasn't drowned in the flood of red ink, Nambale MP Sakwa Bunyase, an economist who has previously worked with the World Bank, says the country is walking a tightrope and may just find itself in more trouble than it already is.
If you can't afford it, think twice whether you should spend on it now. You can't fleaser your way through life. But not that's essentially what the country is doing. It's fleasering through life because there have been people who have been willing to give money.
The MP whose bill, the Public Debt Management Authority 2020, is in the second reading, is calling on Parliament's leadership to prioritize it.
The bill is intended to take the country to an area of professional management of resources. Political leadership, because they are the ones who decide where and how much money will be spent, is not being touched. They continue to do that. We are just saying, don't just think that this is a good project. Analyze it rigorously.
The bill, among other proposals, seeks to establish an independent state agency to review the purposes for all borrowing proposals floated by the National Treasury and advise the National Assembly on the feasibility of the loan. It also provides that due diligence be carried out on the government's debt-funded projects in terms of their actual costs and economic returns to avert further loss of taxpayers' funds through inflated costs by corrupt state officers. Kenyans have fussed over the government's borrowing appetite and spending culture, especially after the IMF approved a 256 billion shillings facility to help the country deal with the ravages of the COVID-19 pandemic. Sources intimate that plans are afoot to raise the debt ceiling to 12 trillion shillings. Kennedy Muredi, NTV.
Meanwhile, as the country racks its brains over how to deal with the debt question, broke counties are trying to figure out how to stay afloat amid a pandemic. Kiambu Governor James Nyoro is among county heads who have called on Treasury to release their share of billions as counties continue to face a cash crunch and depressed revenues owing to the ravages of the pandemic. The Council of Governors has called on the Treasury to release up to 85.2 billion shillings to the counties to ensure county operations don't stall.
We are facing a lot of challenges. First of all, today is 9th of April. We have not received pesa yetu kutoka kwa national government kutoka January. January hatujapata, February hatujapata, March hatujapata. The national government today owes Kiambu more than 2.5 billion shillings. Hata hatuja lipa wafanyikazi wetu. The frontline workers who have been working on this COVID. Can you imagine we have not paid them their salary, their March salary? Because our money is lying somewhere in Treasury.
Well, to politics now, in Siaya, Senator James Orengo has dismissed claims that the handshake between ODM leader Raila Odinga and President Uhuru Kenyatta was on its deathbed. The senator also rubbished claims that the handshake was about the 2022 succession. Listen in.
The unity built on the basis of the handshake between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, that unity is found. That unity stands on a rock, like the rock on which Jesus and his disciples built the Church of Christ. We don't want people to be misled that 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people can sit down and decide for Kenyans who is going to be the president of the Republic of Kenya. That is a choice that the only people who can make are the people of Kenya.
Meanwhile, a family in Webuye in Bungoma County is mourning their loved one who was crushed to death at the rye paper factory in Webuye, formerly known as Pan Paper. His family accuses the company's management of not being forthcoming with the details of his death while on duty. NTV's Zakis Mosame has more.
According to family and friends, the deceased 64-year-old Mzee Jari Mokoth reported to work as usual, but this will be the last time he will be reunited with his family. News of his tragic end started to filter through at around 7:30 a.m., 2 hours after he reported to work. Sarapaya Mesache is one of the co-workers who saw him before his final moments.
Lakini baada ya muda kidogo, mzee ametolewa, na vile naongea hivi sasa, tuko Lukulu Mojari. Tumepata nafasi ya kuona mzee na tumeona vile mashini imemuua mwenzetu. Ni ya kushangaza sana.
Nilitamani nifike huko lakini walinisinda. Wakakataa siwezi nikafika huko. Na mimi huyu bwana yangu ndio msaidizi wangu. Niko na watoto 9, sina kitu chochote. Yeye ndiye alikuwa anafanya kazi, analeta tunasomesa hao watoto wetu. Na sasa vile hakuna, mimi sijui nianzie wapi.
Okoth's death is still a mystery since he worked at the factory safety department. The family accuses the management of Fry Pan Paper Mill of withholding information relating to his death.
Sijaona hata watu wapani, hata vile alikufa vile walikuwa wanatoka na yeye, waliniacha tu kwa Pan Paper. Hawakunichukua, sikuona mtu yoyote. Majirani yenye nilienda nao ndio niliwaona. Na mimi tukatoka tukaenda mochari. Tumefika huko kwa mochari, wakamuweka kwa mochari na wakamuacha huko. Sijui kitu chochote na sijui nianzie wapi.
Leaders from the area called on the company to cater for his burial expenses, even as they asked the factory to improve working conditions.
Today, as we are talking, nothing has been taken care of. So I want to appeal to the national government under the president of this country, Uhuru Kenyatta, please speed up through the minister industries so that our people can be paid. They can do other business, those who want to do business, those who want to do farming. Those who have some arrears from the creditors, they can pay off and do their own things.
Zakis Masame, NTV, Bungoma.
Well, time for a short break, but when we come back, Conservation Crossroads, that special report by Bridget Singana, will be airing. Stay with us.
Mama yao, angalia mikono yangu na parara. Ala, aibu gani mwenzangu? Kwani umekuwa ukitumia sabuni gani ya unga? Unahitaji sabuni na laini kwa mikono. Unaona Ariel mpya inayeyuka haraka na ni laini kwa mikono yako, huku ikiondoa madoa sugu. Na mikono yangu laini na safi.
For a better tomorrow, don't forget to do the 1, 2, 3 with Colgate every night.
What does it take to move a nation? It starts with a dream. A dream which gains momentum and becomes bigger and better and more audacious. What does it take to move a nation? It takes the commitment to innovate and invest in breakthrough technology, to build partnerships across the continent, to create connections, to enable businesses to make their dreams a reality. What does it take to move a nation? It takes Sendi.
No matter what's going on in the world, there's one place you can go to stay up to date with the latest global news. The BBC News World Service app helps you go behind the headlines and make sense of what's going on around the world. And with a call to listen button, you can listen to live radio without using your data. Download the BBC News World Service app and start listening today.
My darlings, my love will protect you from everything, visible and invisible. We might not always have plenty, but we will always have enough. And whatever Mama touches will magically turn into more for you. Just one capful of Dettol is enough to disinfect surfaces and protect your family and your home. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the FDA.
Tomorrow I'll take the first flight to Mexico. Selene, what you're going to tell me should better be the truth, because if you're playing games with me...
I swear that you will know the whole truth about the life of Roberta and that baby.
I already told you to do whatever you want. Okay then. You just heard me! Leave me alone. Relax.
I don't want to relax. What I want is to find Matilde.
Our brand new gated community project, Happy Gardens in Kitengela. You matter to us. Pay 800k on any of our projects and get 20k cashback. PAP. Call us now on 0790 300 300.
Glad you could stay with us. You're watching NTV Weekend Edition. Now, for communities living near wildlife protected areas, the visible scars from vicious battles with wildlife are the tangible marks of the unyielding human-wildlife conflict. But there are invisible wounds born of the painstaking pursuit of compensation. Government shielding, they say, is also hard to come by. This is the price they must pay for their connection to wildlife, one of the country's top revenue earners, but burdened by their plight. This community in the Masai Mara is now at a conservation crossroad and is now turning the heat on the Kenya Wildlife Service, the guardians of this national treasure. NTV's Bridget Singana now takes us to the wildlife. Well, 3 people have been charged at a Narok court for being in possession of a pangolin, an endangered species hunted for its meat and scales and the world's most trafficked mammal.
I grant each of the accused persons bond of 1 million shillings plus 2 sureties of the same amount.
It has been a grueling 2 weeks for the Kisaika family. They have been waiting for the court's verdict on their application for bond for 3 of their kin arrested for being in possession of a live pangolin, one of the world's endangered species. When we met them, their lawyer had just told them their application had been granted.
We are glad that we are able to process the sureties, and today we are going to have them released out on bond. This is a situation where the pangolin strayed into the homestead of the accused persons, and the accused persons naively posted that development in their social media accounts, telling people what is this animal, what is it for, and it was captured, and then now they were lured into dealing with it, doing business with it.
From the court, the family heads to the Narok GK prison where the 3 had been remanded.
Unfortunately, the one is positive.
Minutes after 7 p.m., Tonywa and Sachan Kisaika walk out of the prison gates to a delighted family. Their elder brother, however, was still at an isolation facility after he contracted COVID-19 while in remand. Tonywa and Sachan now recount the events leading up to their arrest.
Nimekuwa nageti jioni kukunywa chai. Hiyo mnyama akakuja. Wakati alikuja unajaribu kusuguma na fimbo unakataa kwenda. Wakati ambayo jamaa mwingine akakuja akapiga picha. Akaweka Facebook, akauliza hii ni nini. Sisi tunashangaa. Asubuhi ya hiyo siku KWS nakuja akashika sisi, akafukuza na gari, akafukuza kushika hiyo kitu, akamwambia shika ama nipige risasi. Akakubali kushika.
Sisi kujaribu kufukuza hii kitu, kupeleka tu msituni, kakataa kwenda. Sisi kuna mateso sana kwa sababu hizo mnyama wanaishi kwetu. Na sijui sisi wanapeleka wapi hiyo kwa nyama. Wanaishi pamoja nao. Kwa sababu hakuna kuja sasa kusaidia sisi kuchukua, wanakuja kushika sisi. Na sisi ni watu, sio watajiri. Sisi ni watu wanaangalia ng'ombe yako moja, watoto yako haukule.
The Maasai believe the pangolin is a bad omen which brings misfortunes.
Najua mtu kama mimi ninakutaka kumaliza wewe, ninaweza tuma hiyo. Kwa desturi yetu ni mbaya zaidi. Hakuna mtu anaweza karibia, juu ni mnyama mbaya. Na hatukuli, ni mnyama tu yenye inaishi porini. Na hata haonekani kila siku, hata hakuna mtu hata kwangu mimi hatujaiona.
For now, the Kisaika family reunites, hoping that the curse visited upon them will be lifted. But it's only the latest flashpoint in the unrelenting friction between man and wildlife in this, their shared domain. The hues of fiery orange dance in the horizon, symbolizing the birth of a new day here in the Masai Mara Game Reserve. And in the morning cold, we catch a glimpse of this elephant grazing on the dew-filled grass, her calf in tow. Overhead, tourists enjoy an aerial game tour, hoping to sight all the big 5 in their natural habitat. This has been the drill for 6 decades now since the Masai Mara Game Reserve was gazetted as a protected area. It was named after the Ma people who inhabit this area. Every year, tourists troop into this reserve between the months of July and October to witness the annual stampede of wildebeests migrating between the Masai Mara and Serengeti in Tanzania. At best, it is a picture-perfect depiction of wildlife coexisting pristinely with its human neighbors.
No. It's really...
only that yonder, just on the edge of this reserve, families bear deep-seated scars of this constant brush with wildlife. For years, the Maasai community have branded themselves as guardians of nature, coexisting peacefully with the flora and fauna alongside their livestock. And here in Talek, which borders the Maasai Mara Game Reserve, discontent is brewing, especially towards the Kenya Wildlife Service and their handling of incidences of human and wildlife conflict. We're here to find out why the community says it is time that KWS ships up or ships out. Talek, named after the river separating the settlement and the reserve, is one of the 5 villages neighboring the Maasai Mara Game Reserve. For years, the community here has played host to the wildlife who ever so often cross from the reserve into their territory, clashing with their human hosts. Here in the Koriata Manyata, 2 brothers, 34-year-old Joshua Koriata, his brother 29-year-old Dixon Koriata, and their farmhand have just returned from hospital after a near-fatal lion attack at their homestead a fortnight ago.
Hii simba imekuja kwa shamba yangu asubuhi hapa tu nyumbani. Ikawa tukaingisha njao hapo mahali na kulanga nyasi. Asubuhi ikaua njao 2 hatujasikia. Mimi nikatoka nyumbani naona manjao imetoroka mpaka nyumbani. Kuingia hapo nikaona mguu ya simba ikakuta hapo kama imeshika njao. Nikakuja kuhesabu njao yangu nikakuta imekula njao 3. Saa hiyo tu nikaita mzee yetu mwingine, tukaitana, kufuata kutafuta tukakuta simba lakini moja kubwa sana.
The split-second attack left Joshua with a broken tooth and deep claw wounds on his back. The bandages on the arms of Dixon, Joshua's younger brother, and the farmhand cover up tissue wounds from a lioness's bite.
Ngawa hakuna mtu alikuwa ready kwa masilaha juu ni kitu ya ghafla. Sasa hiyo tukaingia msituni kusema ndio hii, ikarukia hii kijana huyu ya kwanza. Huyu hakuwa mbali, ni kama walikuwa pamoja. Akarukia huyu mwingine. Juu sikuwa na kitu ya kudunga, nilikuwa tuna mawe kudunga kupiga na mawe. Kanikuta mimi nikikimbia kanishika hapo. Ameniuma hizi, kandoa meno moja ya juu na kaniuma tena pande akatoboa na kanitoboa pande. Na pande nyingine amenishika na makucha zake. Amenisaidia na kofia ingenirarua pande ya kichwa. Sasa kaingia msituni. Wasio kuikuja kuingia msituni imetoroka sasa kwenda pande ya kwa sapasi.
Juu sasa masimba hatuendi msituni kutafuta kupigana nao. Wanakuja mchana kwa boma kutukuni ni kukula ng'ombe. Si afadhali kama ni usiku. Singekuwa ni kitu ya afadhali ingekuwa inaeleweka. Utakuta watu wamelala na kitu inakuja nyumbani na ingekuja na ipate watoto. Singekuwa kitu mbaya sana.
It's been 2 weeks since the latest lion attack here in Talek, just next to the Maasai Mara National Game Reserve. And Joshua and his brothers are still nursing injuries. They're just here to show us where they found the first calf, where the lioness is said to have attacked and eaten first. This lioness ate attacked about 3 calves in his herd, and right now he's just trying to come to terms with the loss that he's suffered, not just on his body, but also on his flock. Joshua says since the attack, they have hardly mastered the strength or courage to graze the animals. The flock too is in distress. Marima Ole Murunye's Manyata is less than a kilometer from the Koriata homestead. Ole Murunye is nursing an injury he sustained recently while trying to scare away a lion which had attacked his flock. His upper body bears the scars of his youthful encounters with the lions. This past year has been particularly tough for Ole Murunya. One of his sons had his intestines gouged out by a buffalo while he was out herding.
I was attacked by the buffalo when I was looking after the cattle at a small bush there around our home. Then suddenly a buffalo came out in which I was not expecting, and it injured me at the stomach and some intestines came out. I got the assistance from my friends who we were looking after the cattle with. Then they go and go after the manager from one camp. I was taken to the nearby hospital in which I was given my first aid. Then after 5 minutes, a helicopter came and took me to Tenwek Hospital. If I would have stayed there for almost 12 hours or for almost 6 hours there, I would have lost my life because I was highly bleeding.
Salonik's 14-year-old brother Michael shows us the marks on his thigh. They are only a week old. He too had a brush with a lion.
Simba watatu wakakuja. Walikuwa wanadai kula ng'ombe. Wakashika njao moja. So mimi nikaachia hiyo moja. Alafu kurudi, alafu simba ikanifollow, ikanishika hapa paji. So ikanilalisha chini. Nilikuwa naona kama nitakufa kwa sababu ni kama amenilalisha chini. So hata yeye akalala tu hapo na akarudi.
James Oletira recalls how he survived his first lion attack.
It was in 1988, 31st December, when we were looking after the cows, and then I had an encounter with a lion. We were about 6 boys, and we were heading about 300 head of cows. We had about 28 dogs. So the lion popped out from the bush, wanted to stalk at the cows, but on realizing seeing us, it came toward us, running toward us. So we as young men, and we stood up and we said we want to face the beast. Before it reached where I was, I threw my little spear, which penetrated through its front leg. Just the lion kept on perceiving coming towards me. So it came and it kicked me on my right leg, breaking my leg here on the thigh, leaving me badly injured. And then it threw me up like a pepper, being blown by the wind. Actually, before I landed to the ground, already the mob was on my head.
Oletira says he had to be rushed to Nairobi to receive specialized treatment. 26 years later, he would find himself on a hippo's path. He survived but suffered a broken arm.
So my second incident happened the year 2014 when I had an attack of a hippo just at Olarorok, a place called Ngorbob. When we were looking after the calves near the stream down there, just near our homestead, one of the hippo came out and charged us. So it chased us. So because I'm a guide, I had some clues about the wild animal schemes on how to dodge. So as a matter of us running away when the beast was chasing us, I just took a quick turn because I knew a hippo will turn at a 90-degree angle.
For these survivors of wildlife attacks, their scars are a reminder of how close to death they came. But this war has casualties on both sides. Lions in the Mara have faced the community's wrath. Herders sometimes poison them to stop them from preying on their cattle. In 2015, the famous Marsh Pride, a family of lions that starred in the wildlife program Big Cat Diary, died after feeding on a poisoned carcass.
Lions are endangered. We have 2,489 lions in the country, and hyenas are vulnerable. We don't have the exact number, but we see also they're endangered. Why are they endangered, these animals? Because of lack of spaces. We are competing with agriculture, we are competing with humans.
For this community, the legal guardians of the wildlife, the Kenya Wildlife Service, has just been a passive observer in this conflict. A mention of their name evokes feelings of bitterness.
Jina tu KWS, lakini hakuna Kenya natusaidia hata kidogo. Juu maelfu ya ng'ombe imekuliwa hapa, hata watu wenyewe wenye wamekuliwa kitambo hakuna mwenye ameipata faida, mpaka naua watu na hakuna mwenye. Ni jina tu yani jina tu, lakini kufaidi kwa watu hakuna.
Hizo ng'ombe tulikuwa tunakamua hapa tunakunywa maziwa. Hiyo ng'ombe sasa hiyo maziwa imepotea. Hakuna maziwa unapata. Tuko na gharama ya hospitali. Na ndio maana wanakuja kwa mashamba yetu na hatuna ubaya na hawa. Wakikuja na wakae bila kukula mali yetu, hatungeweza kupigana nao. Lakini wakikuja na waanze kukula mali yetu, sitakuwa shida na wewe una usaidizi yoyote.
And helplessness.
They have said that till I got my ID so that they can help me. I'm just asking, according to the law of Kenya, the person is supposed to be paid so that he can come from the hospital and also for him to survive.
But what is most ironic is that KWS has told this young man and many others that because he's underage, because he doesn't have an identity card, he doesn't qualify to be compensated or his family to be compensated for the injuries. We just want to ask, is the life of a young Maasai person who hasn't attained the majority age, is it less than that of a mature person?
May Ololdapash has been on the front lines agitating for the recognition of the rights and role played by the Maasai community in conservation, and mostly for the historical land injustices that have plagued them since the colonial era.
I was born and brought up here in Maasai land, and all my childhood life I grew up seeing every species of wildlife here: rhinos, elephants, lions, and so forth. And I've always known we, or our culture, does not permit killing of wildlife for no apparent reason. And that is true even today. I can emphatically say that today Kenya enjoys visiting Amboseli National Park, Samburu, Masai Mara here, and even parks like Nakuru National Park. Those were original Maasai land, and those are the only places you find wildlife in this country even today. We are the largest victims of wildlife in this nation. Tourism in this country thrives because of the wildlife we protect in Maasai land. This tourism industry doesn't benefit us, zero. This community gets nothing.
He says recent developments in the villages of Sekenani, Aitong, Ololaimutia, Mararianta, and Talek on the fatal and incapacitating injuries inflicted on the residents by wildlife, and the sluggish response from the Kenya Wildlife Service have only sullied the relationship between the community and KWS.
We would not engage in any activities under the sun that will jeopardize the survival of our precious wildlife. But KWS is not the agency to tell us how to manage and protect wildlife. We want KWS disbanded, and we want a new entity created.
The Kenya Wildlife Service has been here in Ewasongiro for 66 years, and in that period, 27 senior wardens have been responsible for the wildlife found within and outside the reserve. It is here that incidences of human-wildlife conflict are reported and compensation facilitated.
If you look at the Greater Mara ecosystem, as I was saying, it has the largest assemblages of wildlife outside of any protected area in the country. And basically it means we have more wildlife outside the Masai Mara National Reserve. And it means wildlife are also found in community areas. Our main preoccupation is actually addressing human-wildlife conflicts and also protecting wildlife at the same time. So basically when we have human-wildlife occurrences, we are actually the first people or the first contact organization in this county.
According to the senior warden, they receive on average 2 to 3 reports of human-wildlife conflict in a month, which translates to about 24 cases a year. Of these 24 reports, very few involve human deaths and injuries, but the community says most of those cases go unreported.
We as an organization, we put human life first, because when an incident occurs, we are supposed to address the issue as soon as possible, like within 24 hours when the report is received. Then we should be able to have taken some action. But for human, maybe just sudden attacks, we normally do it promptly there and there. Sometimes we may be having challenges for accessing some of the areas because of the terrain and maybe because of the weather conditions. But we as KWS, we are committed to ensuring that we address human-wildlife conflicts within the shortest time possible. When a case is reported and there is somebody who has been killed by a wild animal, the first thing we do is that we report the incident to the police station. Then from there, we do a post-mortem. We help communities do post-mortem. And during the post-mortem, there is normally a compensation form which has to be filled by the person who has done the post-mortem. So the process starts there before even the person is buried.
In 2013, the Ministry of Tourism began a compensation scheme to help victims of human-wildlife conflict get reprieve. KWS, alongside a committee involving county officials and community members, are responsible for determining which claims can be paid or not upon assessment. In the current scheme, the highest amount paid to someone in the event of death caused by a wild animal is 5 million shillings.
We have a strategy that we are developing. Actually, it's almost in implementation phase. That's called safe system. Safe system comprises 4 key elements: that's safe person, safe wildlife, safe assets, and safe habitat. There's a spatial planning that is also happening in the county, and that will help because it will let people specifically do the right thing in the right places.
According to the latest task force report on human-wildlife conflict compensation schemes undertaken by the Ministry of Tourism, Narok ranks second in the country's top 5 counties with the highest incidences of human-wildlife conflict. Others are Taita Taveta, Lamu, Kajiado, and Laikipia. Lions, which are responsible for some deaths and injuries here in Narok, are not even in the list of species responsible for the majority of cases of human-wildlife conflict in the country, which are elephants, buffaloes, hyenas, hippos, leopards, baboons, monkeys, snakes, and crocodiles. Since 2016, some conservancies began rolling out their own compensation schemes to supplement the government's initiatives that have since run into headwinds in making payments to victims and are currently under review.
Human-wildlife conflict is two-way. People going to wildlife and wildlife going to people. As a county, we have a support fund called Mara Support Fund that consists of 19% of revenue that's collected here. Per year, tourism revenue is about 2.1 billion that goes back to communities in different aspects. But one of the aspects that is there is the mitigation of human-wildlife conflict.
We're also trying to embrace communities to develop wildlife conservancies, because this will minimize the number of fences that people would want to develop in the area. If you look at some of the fences which have been put up in the Mara, they have also been put up in the areas which is not productive for crop production. So we want to encourage people to do conservation in areas where we think crop production is not compatible to the area.
Last year, the pandemic brought about an unexpected blessing. There were 0 cases of wildlife poaching across the parks and reserves in the country. Tourism Cabinet Secretary reported that 17 million shillings had been disbursed as compensation in that financial year.
And I want to congratulate the governor and the people of Narok for not only managing the Masai Mara Game Reserve, but also creating community conservancies almost the size of the game reserve itself. I want to congratulate the communities all over the country for their efforts in conserving wildlife, and particularly the endangered species.
The Task Force on Human-Wildlife Conflict Compensation Schemes is proposing the separation of compensation claims from the Kenya Wildlife Service and the involvement of an insurance company to process claims on behalf of government. These will come into effect once the proposed amendments to the Wildlife Conservation Management Act of 2013 are effected. But this may be yet another long wait for the community desperate for instant solutions to their immediate problems.
Ingekuwa inatuangalia na ingekuwa karibu kama ma station Kenya yote inafanyika au tayari kuja kufanya, na at least walipe ng'ombe ya watu na walipe wa jamii kama kasi yenye alikuwa amepewa wafanye.
The general perception here is that Maasai people should not or are not capable of articulating their issues. I will have 0 regrets for taking on KWS. By 6 o'clock, you will not be able to walk to my home here because there will be elephants here and lions. How can we not win when this wildlife is on our land? Ours is to appeal for the national government to take this very seriously. We are not going to sit on the periphery of conservation decision-making processes anymore. We will not.
As long as humans and wildlife roam the face of the earth, conflict is inevitable. And for the communities living in close proximity with the wildlife, they want the relevant government agencies to not just acknowledge the harm that comes upon them, but also to pay them their dues, because in these quarters, both human and wild animal lives matter. Bridget, Ghana, NTV at the Masai Mara National Reserve, Narok County.
Conservation crossroads by Bridget Sangana. Then a lot of reaction, a tough balance indeed there at Moses, saying for wildlife, conflict with humans present risks of retaliation. It can also create negative sentiments towards conservation among local communities. something must be done indeed. At Kialo, saying crisis at our reserves. We cannot ignore the communities in reserves or ignore the losses caused by wildlife. And Adam Maina saying lions opt for cattle instead of wild prey due to the easy and quantity of meat, thus the human-wildlife conflict. KWS should strive to create coexistence between people and wildlife with programs to deliver research and conflict management strategies. Talk to us on our social media platforms, on our Twitter handle at NTV Kenya, at Bridget Singana and at Zainab Ismail. The hashtag is Conservation Crossroads. Let's take a short break. We'll be back with more.
Before Ushindi with OxyBrite does so much more. Removes stains easily and cleans it right. Brightens with the magic of OxyBrite. It's a brighter life with Ushindi.
What is family? Family is a solid foundation to build on and a strong pillar to lean on. It is believing in each one of us for the betterment of all of us. Family is working together today to win together tomorrow. It is creating opportunities for a lifetime of happiness. It is knowing we are valued, respected, understood, and most of all, supported. The future is bright because you can always bank on family. Family Bank, with you for life.
This looks different.
It is. See for yourself.
Okay, so it's a photo.
Look closer. Photos within photos.
What about video?
8K video, beyond cinema quality.
So
you can pull portrait quality photos straight from video.
But will it last the whole trip?
Battery for the whole trip and the way back.
This is different.
Told you.
Do your gums hurt? Yeah. Does your toothpaste contain sage, eucalyptus, myrrh, chamomile? All that in one toothpaste? Yes, try Colgate Herbal. Colgate Herbal contains nature's best herbs and Colgate's fluoride technology to give you strong teeth and healthy gums. Ah, Colgate Herbal. Let's go. Colgate Herbal for strong teeth and healthy gums naturally.
Oh, I've tried. Hi, Mama. From your first day at school to you captaining your soccer team. No matter how old you are, you'll always be my baby. That's why I trust Dettol to clean, protect, and keep you refreshed every day. I still can't believe how quickly you've grown. Dettol, tested effective against COVID-19.
Africanacity is not just a word, it is part of who we are. And our commitment to working with you to find a way to get things done. We love Africanacity. We are one with you.
Sensitivity pain fast with Sensodyne Rapid Action for clinically proven relief in 60 seconds.
We're glad you could stay with us. Now, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline project has received a jump start following President Samia Suluhu's visit to Uganda to sign the agreement on the $3.5 billion project. The project has been flanked by complaints by small farmers and families that accuse the government of displacing them. It had been put on ice following the death of the late President John Pombe Magufuli in March.
Under the fluttering flags of the Kenya, Tanzania and East African flags, Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu was received by Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni on her first official state visit to Uganda to sign an agreement between the two countries to cement the East African crude oil pipeline. The project is set to transport crude oil from Uganda's oil fields to the Tanga port in Tanzania, which sits just near the Indian Ocean. But the $3.5 billion project has not been welcomed by everyone, including families living near the allocated construction sites who say they will be displaced, and environmentalists who say it will be dangerous for wildlife, primarily around Lake Victoria and the Indian Ocean.
I'm quite conversant that prior to the implementation of this project, there are still pending issues that need to be addressed. And in this regard, I urge all parties to work together to address the remaining issues to ensure the expeditious start of this project.
Once complete, it will potentially be the longest heated crude oil pipeline in the world. President Suluhu says the project will forge further regional integration, with Museveni saying it will be the core of bigger deployments.
I humbly wish to encourage all the countries in the region to continue building these infrastructures and projects that shall spur our economic growth.
Uganda had initially planned to connect the project with Kenya before changing its position in 2016 and opted for the Tanzania route, saying it would be much cheaper. Suluhu's visit comes even as Kenya reaches out to Tanzania for a visit of goodwill following erstwhile frosty relations between Kenya and Tanzania during President John Magufuli's term. Ngena Kirori, NTV.
All right, and that report by Ngena Kirori takes us to yet another break. But when we come back, all the sporting action.
Family is working together today. It is creating opportunities for a